Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the APS 105 Plenary Lecture. I'm going to explain what that really is in a moment, but I need to ask you a question. My name is Jonathan Rose. Some of you already know me. I'm the course coordinator in APS 105 and somewhat responsible for the virtual machine that I hope you've all tried to download onto your home computers. Hands up if you have succeeded in making the virtual machine and the Linux system work so far, which is a big chunk of people. So first of all, hold your hands up high. I want everybody else who hasn't succeeded, and I have sympathy for those who haven't succeeded, to realize that it is possible. There do appear to be some issues. Hands up if you haven't made it work yet. There's a bunch. I've seen some traffic or talked to people. Even Professor Stum couldn't get it working at first, but now he has it working. Please read Piazza and read the note from the head TA that came out yesterday. There's a couple of issues. It is surprisingly difficult to make things work on everybody's computer. And we have tried a couple different ways each year. We think this is a better way, although you might not agree if you're struggling with it. It is, I believe, super important to be able to do your homework on your home computer. It just seems like that's important. And this seems to be the best way we can to get a working NetBeans and compilers for you on your own computer. There are other ways, and if you can do that, that's fine. But keep trying, it's really important, and ask for help if you need it. And look at Piazza, there's lots of things there. Is this too loud, by the way? I can kind of hear myself. It's okay? Okay, so this is the plenary lecture. There's nothing really quite like this in any of your other courses, and to me, this is an important thing to do. And here's why. In APS 105, we're taking you from the beginnings of what it means to become a programmer, a software programmer, and it's not easy. We have to start with little stuff and grow it into bigger and bigger stuff, but it isn't going to grow all that big. In Lab 7 and 8, by the way, just to tell you something exciting for some of you, you are going to make a game that will play against other people's games, and that will be fun. So that's the most sophisticated thing you'll do, but it's not really all the stuff that maybe you already know software can do. So the purpose of these plenary lectures is to leap ahead and say, look at all these interesting things that software can be applied to. And software can be applied to tons and tons of things. And that's what most of the lectures are going to be. And a couple of them will actually be some things related directly to the labs and some help sessions for the tests and the exams. But mainly they're going to be interesting. To make sure that you come, there will be some questions on the midterm and the exam related to these plenary lectures. I know that you're very busy. I know that if I didn't do that, you maybe wouldn't come, and I really want you to come to these lectures, so that's why I'm doing that. They won't be that hard, and if you can't quite get yourself up, it doesn't look like the entire class is here, at 9 a.m., these lectures are recorded, and you'll be able to pick them up online, so you can watch them there. But I think they're more interesting in person, and there's a bunch of interesting people coming. I'm going to give the first one in a moment. We have people from industry coming. Danielle Wang is a graduate from U of T who works at Google Waterloo, and she's going to talk about Google software at Google scale. And it's a nice talk, and she's given it a few times, and it's very interesting. Professor Stum does a lot of research together with folks at Facebook, and he knows a lot about how they develop software, and it's really quite fascinating, their process of rolling out software to over 1 billion people, which is stunning if you think about it. Inmar Gavoni, for example, is a PhD graduate from U of T who just switched over to this startup a couple months ago. She used to work for Kobo, the book people, as their vice president of big data. And now she's in this stealth mode startup called Kindred, which doesn't really talk about what it's doing, except it's doing AI, artificially intelligent robots. And she's scheduled a bit later because maybe by then the company will tell us a little bit more about what they're doing. Her topic will be machine learning. One of the most important things going on in software today is the ability of computers to learn things and do things that humans can do. And she gives a great talk on that. And this is a new lecture this year. Safdar Mahmood is a graduate from ECE who works at Accenture, one of the world's largest consulting firms. She's going to come and talk about how he uses software in a consulting firm. So all kinds of different things, and there's even more here, that I hope you'll find interesting. And this is not a regular type lecture. I'm not expecting you to learn anything. I'm trying And we are trying to inspire you to become interested in all the things that software can do. So, let me begin with the first one. This talk is about the creativity possible with software, and more specifically, the creativity that was enabled with the advent of smartphones. It's actually interesting. Three days ago was the 10th anniversary of the introduction of the iPhone. How old were you 10 years ago? How old were you 10 years ago? 8. It's a little bit hard for me to get my head around that. I'm 58, and 10 years ago, this was a revolution. Everything changed when this happened, and I'm going to talk about why and where that led. But before we do that, let's figure out, I always like to do the survey, it's kind of interesting, it changes every year. What kind of phone do you carry? Hands up if you carry an iPhone. Wow. What do we think? That's like 60, 70%, which is not typical of the world, by the way. Hands up if you've got an Android phone. Maybe that was close. Maybe 55, 45. The world is, anybody know what the world is? Android, iPhone, do you know what the numbers are? 80-20. 80-20. 80% Android, 20% iPhone. Mind you, 95% of the profit in the industry goes to Apple, because all those Android phones are cheaper. Anybody got a BlackBerry? There we go, look at that. A Canadian, and Matt the videographer has one. That's sad but true. Anyone not have an iPhone? Usually if you don't, a smartphone. When I give this talk to older audiences, usually there's one or two people in the audience who put their hand up and go, damn it, I don't have one, I refuse. But in your world, I understand you can't exist in your social anything if you aren't connected. Hands up if you've got a wearable of some kind on. 1, 2. I think there's actually more than that, because when I scanned the room, there was a whole pile of them on Bluetooth there. So some of you are just being afraid to show me. Okay. Wearable things are interesting. I'm going to talk about them. Okay. What do you use these things for? Now, there's a bunch of things, they're part of our lives. We use them for, email, taking pictures, Snapchatting, keeping our Snapchat streaks alive. I just learned about that the other day. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Navigating, checking the weather out, maybe making phone calls. That's probably the smallest thing you do. Beyond that, what is your favorite other app? Some other interesting thing? Tell me. Yeah.
Taking notes or writing down things I have to do.
Taking notes, writing down things you have to do? Yeah. They just record things? Yeah. What else? What other interesting things do you use your phone for? It's not just Snapchat, right? Yeah. Dictionary and translation. What do you use for translation? Google Translate? Yeah. The article in the New York Times about that, you read that? There's a great article in the New York Times magazine 3 weeks ago about how machine learning all of a sudden made translation good, really good, surprisingly good by Google Translate. Driven, by the way, by University of Toronto professor Jeff Hinton in computer science. He's a famous machine learning person. Any other favorite apps? Yeah. To check the time. It's your watch. Yeah, you guys don't carry watches, right? I do. What else? Yeah. Audible for books, listening to books, yeah. And podcasts. Do people listen to podcasts? Podcasts are amazing these days. It's sort of a whole new thing. Yeah. What else? Yeah. YouTube, of course, yeah. Watching stuff, yep. Instagram, of course, yeah. Yep. Blackboard. Those of you who are in my sections know I've already abused Blackboard. Although there is an app for it, right? Yeah, that's true. Anything else? Anything else interesting? Something different? Yeah. Amazon? To buying stuff or shopping? Yeah, that's true. You can buy everything. And you go into a store and check. You go in the store and find out cheaper things or better things. Yep.
Bus times.
Oh, bus times. Yeah, when the bus comes along. Yeah. There's lots and lots of things out there. And if you're in my section, I'll probably tell you at one point about my app. It's called Team Chooser, and it helps you choose fair teams when you're playing sports. And I've been working on this since 2009. It's been released in the iPhone App Store. And just released a new version actually about a week ago that has a better algorithm in it. Go check it out. These devices changed everything. 10 years ago, they announced the iPhone, but the really dramatic thing that happened was about 3 years later when the App Store opened, and all of a sudden, anybody who could write software could make applications that would go on the machines that everybody had. And I remember just sitting there when that first showed up on my iPhone, 2008, I think it was, and go, whoa, I can now download. There were hundreds of apps on the App Store, all kinds of clever ideas. And it meant people like you, once you finish taking this course and maybe learned a little bit more, can make things that are available to everyone. And that, I think, changed the world in many, many ways. And it isn't just that. So the key was it's programmable and we can all do that. But before that, we had powerful computers, but they were laptops or desktops. But now it's in your pocket. And maybe this, I've given this lecture over 7 years, really. And maybe this is not news to you, but it is a powerful computer. It is networked to the rest of the world. It has amazing sensors, which not everybody knows about. I'm going to talk about in this lecture. It has some powerful outputs, and it's just incredibly portable. And so in that moment, it became a new canvas, a new medium that people can draw on or write on, except you have to be able to write software to do that. And that's what's happened over the next years. Part of the reason that they are so powerful is the capabilities in the phone. Let me run through them quickly here, and then I'm going to walk through them more slowly. The thing that made the phone usable was the touch screen. Before that, it wasn't clear how something so small could be usefully interacted with. So that was important, and it became cheap enough. There is something called an accelerometer. Hands up if you know what an accelerometer is. It is a device, a sensor that measures the acceleration of the phone or whatever in 3 dimensions. So in the X dimension, Y dimension, and Z dimension. Z, X, Y. And it does it rapidly. There's another device, a sensor in all your phones called a gyroscope that measures the rotation of the phone, this way, or that way. And there's a third key sensor called a magnetometer that measures the magnetic field surrounding the phone in also 3 dimensions. So each of these sensors measures its quantity, acceleration, rotation, magnetic field, in 3 dimensions. So here's a buzzword that's useful to know, and I'm going to use it in a couple more times in this talk. This is so common that altogether, and it takes way too long to say 3-dimensional this, 3-dimensional 3 that, we just call it the 9-axis sensor. And it means this, 3-dimensional acceleration, gyroscope, and magnetometer. So 9-axis shows up kind of in everything, including wearables these days. Most phones have a barometer that measures air pressure. They, of course, have the amazing GPS that tells you where you are and once you know that, all kinds of great things can happen. A great microphone, a front-facing camera, a great display, a flash, a proximity detector that figures out if your head's close to the screen so that you can turn the screen off, a light sensor that allows it to adjust the screen brightness but could be used for other things, a Bluetooth radio that connects to all the other stuff you might connect it to, something not so obvious, something called a near-field communication radio, which is the thing they use for pay things these days, and every phone has some kind of vibration thing that you can actually control that vibrates the phone, and so you can send information to the user somewhat silently. So all of these things are in the phone, and they're portable, and they're connected to the computer. And with the Bluetooth radio, there's all kinds of things you can connect. Sensors like this one that can measure oxygen and climate. There's a bunch of these devices that you can track things, so if you lost your keys, you can go find them. There's all these wearables that people have. I can't quite buy these yet, but they look really cool. Instrumented clothes that measure stuff about you. And things like this, a posture monitor, which I'm actually wearing. I don't know if you can see it right here. It's an accelerometer, and it keeps an eye on whether I'm standing up straight or not. If I slouch for more than 15 seconds, it vibrates. And so I've been worried about my posture. And so that one's kind of a cool idea that drives me a little crazy when I'm slouching too much. All of this technology has given rise to what I think is one of the most fertile times and the greatest surges of creativity in human history, because so many things are all of a sudden possible. There are over 2 million apps on both of the major app stores. And it's been incredible. And you've been living through it from age 8 onwards, maybe 10 onwards. And it's super exciting. These things are across every field. Of course, the biggest chunk of apps are games, but there's lots of things in health and fitness and productivity and entertainment. It's amazing what's been happening. So you might say, well, that's it. We've got all the great ideas. Nothing left to be done. Whenever humans have said that, it's been wrong, and it's certainly wrong today, I think, for 3 reasons. The first reason is that these devices are so much a part of us that we, as a species, are evolving. Our brains are changing. Your brain has changed, right? You can't really go very long without, in fact, those 2 people right there are staring at their phones and playing with something, because you can't stop yourself from using your phone. It has changed your brains in many ways, and that fact means there's other opportunities for new ideas to help be responsive to those brains, those changes. And so just the fact that we're evolving means, if you think about it, there's something new that we need to do with software connected to us. Ultimately, I suppose, we are going to have these things plugged directly into us, so you can just think and chat and snap. So that's going to happen. So lots of opportunities are related to that. Also dangerous things, of course. I'm not saying it's all perfect. The fact that you can't move your eyes from those phones. See that guy there? He's looking at his phone. You. That's not a good thing, right? You're not paying attention to me. At least I think you should be paying attention to me. So there's bad things in this world, but those are new opportunities for ideas. The other thing is this market is one of the most unusual markets ever created, the market for smartphones. There is incredibly fierce competition between the big players, some of whom are here, Apple, of course, and Samsung. Huawei's a big player these days. They are creating new technologies to try to get you to buy their phone. This is a 1 billion unit market every year. More than 1 billion phones are sold every year, so they're all competing fiercely to create new things. I actually have a research contract with one of my colleagues to build a new technology to go into phones that if Huawei buys into it, they might put it into their phones. And if they do that, those phones will be really cool. I'll tell you what that is some other time. Because this is such a large-scale market, everything that they put into the phone has to be cheap. An accelerometer used to cost thousands of dollars. Now it costs a few pennies. Same with gyroscopes and all those other things I put in. Because the engineering and the competition and the economics of that market is whatever they put into these things, it has to be low cost. And so all of a sudden, things that were really expensive become cheap. And so this is a really interesting dynamic that's going to generate new capabilities. The third reason, and I think one of the most important ones, is software in the presence, operating on phones and connected to the internet, can change every field of human endeavor. It is as important as language and writing. And not everybody else, there's you're learning how to program software. Everybody else, like 95% of the world in other disciplines, don't know how to write software. But what needs to happen is they need to somehow get together with people who can write software or learn to do it themselves so that they can evolve their field of medicine or music or physics or astronomy. They need to be enabled to do new things in their field that are newly possible with all of this technology. And so that's one of the primary reasons I think there's lots of great ideas to come. So one thing to take away from this talk is interdisciplinary collaboration from you engineers off into these other fields can yield all kinds of exciting things. And I believed this so deeply when I first encountered the iPhone that for the last 7 years ago, I started teaching a graduate course that tried to do exactly that. It was, the name of the course is called ECE 1778, Creative Applications for Mobile Devices. And it is open and has been open to every graduate student here at U of T in every field. And the idea was to bring in students from, of course, engineering and computer science, but from music and physics and medicine and psychiatry to pair them up with a couple of programmers to do an app in their field for the exact reason that I just said, that we need those people to mingle with us and create new things. And so in this talk, I'm going to kind of talk about capabilities of, I'm going to run out of time too, talk about these capabilities I just mentioned and then say this is an example that came out of that course, or now my research is kind of in that area. I'm going to describe some things and some other interesting things in the next half hour or so. So this is my attempt to bring those worlds together, and I suggest to you that you should do that too. Find somebody over in Arts and Science and see what they know and see if you can create something exciting. Yeah, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Here's some screenshots from a very small selection of all the apps. There's been over 130 of them in my class over all that time. I won't explain any of them yet. This is a research project right now. This app is called Practice Cactus. It's driven by a PhD student in the Education Institute up here, and she is a music teacher. And this app, first of all, it listens to people who are practicing piano and notices if they're playing piano. And if they are playing piano, the little cactus grows and gets happy. But the second purpose is it reports back to the teacher on a website that you did practicing. And the teacher can send you suggestions of what to practice, and she or he can see what you're doing. So that's kind of a cool thing. But the actual research that she's doing, and we're about to deploy this in the next month, is to see when you actually achieve something, you do a practice and you want to say something, there's sort of an automatic posting to a web page to create a community around the other players. Because the hardest part about learning piano is to practice. And they're asking the question, can we create a community where people encourage each other to practice? So it's an interesting use of software and some signal processing, because it's a little bit tricky to figure out if somebody's actually playing the piano or not. And this creation of community. It's one example among many of things that have happened in the course, and I'm going to talk about a few more of them just now. By talking a little bit about those sensors and then showing what we did with them. So this is my favorite sensor, that accelerometer. It measures acceleration in 3 dimensions, measured in meters per second squared. Remember that from your high school? The important thing about this sensor is it measures it acceleration 100 times per second. Not once per second, but 100 times per second. So if I'm moving like this, the accelerometer can track all of that motion, because 100 times per second is pretty often. Most of the sensors are sampling at a rate like that. So tons of information about how the person is moving comes from this sensor. So, because you're engineers, it's good to add this. All of this technology, of course, comes from integrated circuit technology. Electrical engineering, transistors and wires and stuff. The mechanicals woke up and realized they could take that same technology and start building clever sensors. So they get credit for building the accelerometer sensor. This is built with this is a microphotograph of an accelerometer sensor. This is the XY sensor, this is the Z sensor, built out of integrated circuit technology. That kind of thing is called micro-electromechanical systems. And there are people here in mechanical engineering who do research on this. It's very interesting and cool. This produces awful looking data. So in fact, you need an entire chip to process the data inside your phone coming out of the accelerometer to give those nice numbers. What's the acceleration every 1/100th of a second? So it's kind of pretty cool technology. So that's the accelerometer. Let me show you one of my favorite apps. It's actually now a research project that started life in my graduate course. It started life as a thing called iAnkle. And it's now called MyAnkle. And Nurtul Shah, at the time, was a master's student in public health, but he's also a practicing physiotherapist. And these two were MN students in electrical and computer engineering. And they built the first version of this app. And its general notion was to use the accelerometer to measure something about people who have had ankle injuries. And I'll just note that lots of other people have worked on it since. I'll talk more about that in a second. So this app has been around for a while, been evolving it in a bunch of ways. But let's give you the background. Its focus is ankle injuries. I'm sure everyone here has once upon a time done this to their ankle. You go over and it hurts a lot because you've stretched the ligaments in your ankle. You sprained your ankle. If you break your ankle, it could probably do the same thing. It's a bad thing. What you're supposed to do, well, what happens, by the way, is you lose an ability to balance. Your muscles get all out of whack when you sprain it. And what you're supposed to do to recover from it is a certain set of exercises under the guidance of a physiotherapist to recover from this. If you don't do it, you lose some of your balance and you're likely to do it again. And you may not walk properly, actually, even after an ankle sprain. But almost nobody does this because our healthcare system doesn't cover physiotherapy, and they cost $120 an hour. So that's what Nurtul did, and that's what they charge. Although you can get cheaper physiotherapy here at the Macintosh Clinic at U of T. That's where he works, actually. He's a great physiotherapist. But most people don't do anything about this. So our notion and his notion was, this is what the physiotherapist does. They look at you, they watch you walking, they say, oh, okay, do these exercises. They prescribe some exercises. You do them, you come back to them the next week, and they watch you walking and measure stuff about you by looking at you to figure out if you're progressing. That measuring is very subjective. It's just like, oh, they kind of watch you balance. They watch, if you're doing this, they watch how many times you fall over. And it's not very objective. The idea behind my ankle is to use the accelerometer to objectively measure how well you're balancing and use that as a way to track how you're recovering from the ankle injury. So the idea is you do a balance exercise like this person here. You strap the phone, which is fine, or tuck the phone in the sock and measure, or get a wearable and wrap that around your ankle, and measure how much you wobble, and that's an objective measurement of how well you're recovering. At least that's the idea. And there's a bunch of different exercises. This app actually exists on the Android App Store. Let me show it to you, because it works. Yeah. Give me 1 second. It's going to take me a second to get this up and running. Hopefully you're not all using the wireless internet here. That's eventually going to interfere with what I'm doing. Oh, there we go. Getting somewhere? Okay, good. That's my ankle. This is the wearable. I'm going to turn it on and connect to it. You watch all that? It's connected. And, this is how it works. It's pretty simple, actually. We strap this to the ankle like that. And if I want to measure my balance, I say if I want to select my left foot or my right foot. Let's do my right foot. You can do it with your eyes open or closed. It's much harder to do this with your eyes closed because your eyes are part of your balance system. I'm going to keep them open so I don't hurt myself. And I pick an exercise. I'm going to do 1 foot. And I hit the start measuring button. And it does a little, you hear that, time down. I'm supposed to get ready. And then notice I'm kind of wobbling. I'm wobbling extra. And for 10 seconds, it's going to measure, it's using the accelerometer that's in this thing to measure how much I'm wobbling, and it says it's done. You can see all that. Save it, and it says my balance number is 0.9. And so if I were to do exercises, I could track and see if that balance number got better, which is kind of cool. So, so that's my ankle working. And you can track your results over time and do things like that. What's interesting, this project has really been interesting to me. We've had it for a long time. The way you're supposed to recover from, or to do the therapy you're supposed to do are actually balance exercises. Things like standing on 1 foot. But it turns out standing on 1 foot for a long time is kind of boring. Actually, you can't really do it for more than 1.5 minutes. So one of the things that's shown up in this project and others is, can we take all this software and our ability to change it, can we make it fun? Can we turn it into a game? And so I've had some students actually from this class work on this, trying to gamify. There we go. Gamify this game. And we do it this way. We measure how well you wobble to begin with, and that becomes a standard that you're trying to beat. And we create a screen that shows you in the middle your value of how much you normally wobble and a real-time measurement of how much you're wobbling, and you watch it to see if you want to, if you can beat it. Anybody want to try it? I have a volunteer. You have to run down here really fast. No, I don't want to do it. I want somebody else to do it. Here. All right. I need a volunteer down here. Come on up. That's great. Where is air server? Here, can you strap this to, say, your left ankle? Why not? Yeah, strap it as tight as you can. Yep. Cannot find the air server. Hang on 1 second, I just want to make sure. I'm going to have to reconnect this thing, I think. Just seems to take a moment to do this. What's your name, by the way?
Miriam.
Marion. There we go. Okay. So you're eventually just going to put your hands on your hips and pick one leg up. But we need to calibrate first. So we'll go back and we'll say we're going to play a game. You're going to use your left foot, and you should turn around and look at the screen actually. And we'll do 1 foot. Oh, we've already calibrated. Now we want to recalibrate. Let's try it. We'll try a slightly different one so that it needs to calibrate. Okay, first thing you're going to do is for 5 seconds or so, you're going to do this and it's going to measure. So do it right now. Stand on 1 foot. Oh, keep your foot up as you can, and that's good. Wobble a lot, yes. So it's measuring you. It'll measure you for 10 seconds to figure out what you roughly wobble like. Okay, and your balance number is 0.72. And so now we're going to start playing, and I'm going to turn this up so you can hear it.
Let's work on your balance. The key is to focus on your balance.
So that's good. Oh, now you're over. No, that's not good. You're wobbling.
Try to keep your balance.
Oh, okay, it didn't go so well. Let's try it again. Let's try. You ready?
Let's work on your balance.
It's going to start. Oh, the accelerometer disconnected. Darn. Okay, we won't reconnect that. Thank you, Miriam, for doing that. But you get the idea. Thanks. I actually think that's a really important thing, to have the ability to turn things that we need to do into fun, gamification. And it happens, like companies are doing this to all the time. In fact, Snapchat is doing this to you. They have gamified making you use their app with this streak thing, right? It's kind of a game. You can't go a day without sending one picture of yourself to your buddies. And that's them trying to keep you giving them money, essentially. This is about trying to do healthy things. And I think gamification of healthy things is a good thing. I actually have a 4th year capstone project where they're trying other games for the same problem. There's balancing and they're shooting at stuff while you're balancing. We'll have to see how that plays out. If you go to the design fair at the end of this term for the 4th year ECE projects, you'll see whatever they came up with, that group. All right, let's get this working. Okay, so that project, by the way, has been worked on for a long time. The simple version of My Ankle is on the Google Play Store, but students from this class actually have worked on that game. Jordan Lee worked on creating that game last year, and others have worked on different versions of it. And 4th year thesis students have worked on it as well. Okay, where am I? Oh, I have many things to cover, and I'm not going to cover most of them. I've already talked about the gyroscope that's in the phone, so I won't dwell on that. Although it is good to note that it is also a micro-electromechanical system, a different one, very sophisticated thing. The compass, the 3D magnetometer I've talked about, the barometer I've talked about, I guess the touch screen I've talked about, and you always use the GPS to know where you are. So here's an interesting app that is also now a research project. that started in my course. It was called Mindful Me, and Elizabeth Glenn Guy was a PhD student in psychology, focusing on addiction research. People get addicted to all kinds of things that isn't good for them, drugs, alcohol, all kinds of stuff. Shobit and Yvonne were computer science master students. And addictions, of course, ruin lives. They take people like this and turn them into people like this. We're facing a fentanyl crisis right now. Addictions are terrible things. It would be nice if we could help people. One method that has traditionally been used in addiction treatment is to ask someone who's an addict to journal, to write in a journal the set of cravings that they have, how they're feeling, what's driving them to take their drug or alcohol or whatever. So the purpose of that is to provide reflection and maybe give strength to push away from those things that drive people towards the addiction. But the problems of writing in a journal, people would ask you, what are you writing all the time? And it's kind of a private thing when you're dealing with an addiction. And it's tedious. It's hard to do because it's hard to remember, and you might not be carrying your book with you. So the idea that Elizabeth had was, let's make an app to make that journaling easier. It's a good idea, perfectly fine idea. And of course, since everybody has a phone, it's easy to do. So, and it would make it easier to do more often. You could automatically make use of all the stuff that a phone has to record things and visualize your data, all kinds of great things that you could use that for. But what was really interesting, and this is what's exciting about when you do this interdisciplinary stuff, is a really interesting idea came up in the class once she started talking about that. It became kind of obvious to everyone, I don't even remember who suggested it, that if you were carrying a phone, and it was, phone's kind of watching, it knows what you're doing, it knows how you're moving with the accelerometer, it knows where you are with the GPS, it could listen, it could even watch what you're doing. If you could use that information and figure out that someone was kind of heading towards a relapse, say you're an alcoholic, and you start heading towards the bar that you drink at, well, the phone knows that. And the really exciting idea is, well, the phone is an actor. It's a piece of software. It could do something. It could intervene. A piece of software could intervene. It's a really exciting idea that maybe could help people. Maybe. It's a very tricky thing, playing around with people's minds who are in this way. Maybe you could do something to divert them away from relapsing. And that's a super exciting idea. And that's what came out of that course. And lots of things come out in the course and will happen with you if you try to do this. Once you start thinking about what's possible, once you live inside the world that you created with the software and this thing. So what would an intervention be? Well, say you're already in Alcoholics Anonymous, if you know what that is. You have a sponsor who's supposed to help you. Well, maybe the phone would just call your sponsor and he or she could help you talk through this attempt to get to the bar. Or it could play you a song or a text. And in fact, there's one thing the original app did is Elizabeth reads a mindfulness script, which sounds very touchy-feely, but actually even when I listen to her reading that mindfulness script, I find it very calming. And I can imagine it might help me kind of push away a craving of some kind. But there's many other interesting ideas that all of a sudden became possible with this idea of addiction treatment. Here's some screenshots of you setting your mood level and your urge level and figuring out where you are. And here's where you could push a button that said, oh, I'm really, really feeling like relapsing, and it would try to do something to help you in that app. So it was a really great idea, and one of many in the course. This is now actually a research project. So Mindful Me was a general addiction app, and through Elizabeth I ended up meeting with the head of the Nicotine Dependence Clinic, which is right down the street here. At the end of King's College Road, there's this funny looking white building that is part of the CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, and they focus on helping people quit smoking. And so I started collaborating with the leader of that group there, and for the last 3 summers we've been evolving an app that is focusing on quitting smoking, and this is the latest version of it. And we're currently testing it with actual patients at the clinic, not in a clinical trial, but just seeing how they like it and whether you get some rough feedback on it. And we're slowly evolving it to hopefully be an evidence-based smoking cessation app. There's a lot of quit smoking apps out there, but not many of them have actually been tested, and we want to do science to make sure it actually works. And so that's kind of an interesting side project. And one really exciting thing has happened just this past year. I have one 4th-year student working on this who, hopefully one of my master's students, is thinking about making a chat bot. Hands up if you know what a chat bot is. It's these things that talk to you over WeChat or Facebook Messenger that aren't humans. There are computers, but the state of the art of natural language processing and machine learning has become such that we can create intelligent conversations in focused areas. And here, we think there's a really good motivation to help people try to talk them through quitting smoking. In fact, there's kind of two phases, it turns out. I've been learning all about this. There's the phase of contemplating that you think you maybe you'd like to quit smoking, but you haven't decided to do that. And then once you've decided to do it, there's helping you do it. And so the one student is working on moving people from contemplating quitting to deciding to quit using a chatbot with really state-of-the-art natural language processing, which is a whole field, and interacting with our collaborator at this clinic about methods that clinicians use to do that human to human. And what's exciting about that is if you can make it, a chatbot do it, you can scale it all over the place. And this student actually is a fourth-year student who actually is a part-time student because he works for a company called Kik. Anybody have Kik on their phone? Interesting. Kik is a messaging app. It's one of the top 5. It's 200, 300 million users, and they have a platform where you can plug in chatbots into it. You can just build any of your own and have one that does anything, which is an exciting, it's sort of the state-of-the-art excitement in biz tech is what you can do with chatbots, and we hope we can use it in this field. So it's very exciting. I've now gone way too long on things I was going to talk about. The proximity sensor I mentioned, I won't go on that. The ambient light sensor, your phone can measure how much light is in the room. I'm not going to go through this one. This is a fourth-year project, just an interesting idea. We wondered if a camera looking at pollution could measure the pollution. Here's a picture in Shanghai, and you can see that as the distance goes, things fade. And I was talking to Professor Greg Evans in chemical engineering one day and asked him if you could kind of measure how much the fade was happening, could you infer the pollution measurement? And this fourth-year group tried to do that. It's not clear that it worked perfectly, but it did do some things correctly. So that was called Pollutometer, and I believe that actually is on the Android App Store. Super quickly, there's all these cameras. There's an entire field of computer science called computer vision, which is making algorithms that do what you can do very easily. See things, figure out who's there, what it is, how it's moving, and its three-dimensional nature. And I'm not going to talk much about that because one of the plenary lectures this year, it's a new one, is going to be given by Professor Sven Dickinson, who's a specialist in this field. He's going to talk about all the, an introduction to the methods of how computers try to see. It's gotten a lot better lately, and what they do with it. One great example of computer vision, I could show you. It's one of my favorite demos. No, I'll just talk to you about it. This is an app on your iPhone called Cardio, and it measures your heart rate. And I don't have time to give you the demo, or they could. Here's how it measures the heart rate, at least one of the ways it does it. The camera looks at your face for about a minute and ultimately gives you a count of your heart rate. Any idea how that happens? What is it doing when it's looking at your face? What's that? There's definitely blood flowing in your face, but what is the camera seeing? No, go ahead.
It's seeing color changes in your
It's seeing.
arteries dilate.
That's right. Your face changes color with every heartbeat. Can you see my face changing color? You can't. But a computer sampling a picture of your face 30 times per second over a minute, in that information, there's enough signal in that noise, if you know the term, to see the heart rate. And because I don't want to use up time showing you that demo, I suggest you download this app. It's a very cool thing. What it tells you is the device is superhuman. You can't see my heart beating in my face. It can. And by the way, I've tried it on skin color of every color, even the darkest of dark, and the darkest of dark do change color visible to the front-facing camera. It's kind of stunning, and it makes you realize, we're talking about computer vision, computers trying to do what humans can do. Well, here's a computer that can do something a human can't do. It's very cool. I'd give you the demo. If you want to see it, I can show it to you later on. And I'm going to skip through this one. This was one, I'm just going to say briefly, this was an app that measures the pupillary eye response. So it would flash the light flash at the person, and watch your pupil dilate and measure that. And there are pupillometers in hospitals. Oh, these slides are going to take a while. That do that, but they cost thousands of dollars. So it's neat to maybe build that into an app. It's a really great idea. What's the last thing I want to do? I'm going to run out of time. Oh yeah, this is a neat app. That's in a different field. It's not medical. This was somebody in, I think, the education school with a couple of engineers, built an app that measured things about giving seminars, doing exactly what I'm doing, talking. And they used a phone sitting in a pocket to measure several things and give feedback through the buzzer, actually, so that it would tell you things whether you're doing something right or wrong. But what did it measure? It measured, using the microphone, the rate at which you're speaking. So you could set the number of words per minute, and some people talk too quickly. I'm talking too quickly right now. Or talking too slowly, so it would measure that. It would measure how much you're moving. Some motion is good, too much motion is bad, so the accelerometer could pick that up. And it would measure your orientation. Using the magnetometer, it could figure out whether you're facing this way or facing this way. Which is the right way to face when you're talking to an audience? This way. So here's the output. Here it shows your words per minute and the percentage of time you're facing forward and a measurement of your movement. It's a really cool little idea to give feedback for people who would need it to give practicing presentations. Yeah, I'm running out of time. I think there's one favorite last thing I want to show. Yeah, this is my favorite thing. I have many favorite things. So we attach this thing to Miriam's ankle and my ankle to measure things. This is a very low-cost thing. It comes from Texas Instruments. It's called a sensor tag. It's $35 Canadian, $29 US. And it has thousands of dollars, what would have been thousands of dollars of sensors in it. It has a three-dimensional accelerometer, gyroscope, and magnetometer. It has 9 axes in it. It has a light sensor, an ambient temperature sensor, an infrared temperature sensor, a barometer, a humidity sensor, a magnet sensor, and 2 buttons, 2 lights, and a buzzer. All for $35, and it connects through Bluetooth to a phone. And this is it's kind of like any wearable you would buy, but and I think they're selling it at roughly what it costs, because they're trying to sell the chip inside. And I don't actually have time to demo it, but you can get an ordinary app and connect to it and watch all those things happen. And it's sort of a stunning embodiment of how far technology has come, how cheap it is. And you can use this to do millions of things like what I did with my ankle. Maybe that's the only thing to say. So that's a few example applications of mobile and wearable technology. And there's really 2 things I want you to take home from this. The first is that there's immense room for creativity here. There's so many interesting things that have yet to be done and tried in all these disciplines, and I hope that you do that in your careers. It's enabled by the internet and software. And one of the things, like in that addiction app, that was really neat is you try an idea and you build it and you start describing it to people. And when you think about it, you start coming up with other ideas, like that intervention idea. There's another app we had that was done in the first class, done by a nurse, an emergency room app for recording injuries. And it became obvious you should use the camera to take a picture of the injury. But then what wasn't so obvious, but was a really good idea, was if you took pictures of the injury over time, you could overlay those and see what was happening. Just easy peasy with this technology. Every time we create an app like that, if you inhabit it and think about it, things occur to you. And so there is immense possibility of creativity here. And in this software course and other ECE courses, you'll learn how to do all this stuff, including things like digital signal processing, which is involved in that cardio app and lots of other things. The second thing to remember is, because not everybody, many people in the world have smartphones. About a year ago, the number of cellular licenses exceeded the number of people in the world. Not that everybody in the world has a cell phone, but we're getting there. So that means if you can put something interesting into a cell phone, it goes to everybody in the world. So if we can put a doctor into a cell phone, everybody gets a doctor. And I'm sorry for the doctors, it might make them not quite so valuable, but I think the world would change if we could give healthcare to everyone. And that's something I think will be the challenge of your generation. My research is actually starting to take the first steps there, but the challenge of your generation is to do exactly that, to figure out, to take all that knowledge and put it into one piece of software. And that's going to be really, really hard. It's not going to happen for 50 years or so. But when we do that, it will be easy to make copies of, and everybody gets one. And that is the thrilling thing about the scale that is possible when you make software that can do great things, and with these smartphones. So I'm done. If you're interested in seeing what my course has achieved, you can look at videos of the final presentations. Here's the web links to the last 4 years. You can go there and see videos, 5-minute videos of people demoing these things. And here's a quick bunch of pictures of screenshots. Thank you very much, and see you next week for a different one of these.